a very good morning to you and welcome back to your Feel Good Breakfast Show on this Tuesday morning as we touch on a very interesting topic that I think has been making some headlines all around the country. Now, over 400 cases of measles have been recorded in South Africa since October of last year. Now, the National Institute of Communicable Diseases declared an outbreak in 5 provinces, which include Limpopo, Mpumalanga, Gauteng, the Free State, and the Northwest. And here to give us more information about measles is HIV and infectious diseases expert Dr. Emil Reid and pathologist Dr. Howard Newman. And of course, if you have any questions for the doctors, please do send those via WhatsApp voice note to 063 408 8863. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us at the start of a brand new day.
Morning, Katleho.
Great to see you, great to see you. I was just touching on the fact that I thought that we were in an era where measles was no longer of concern. And then, Dr. Emil, you mentioned something very interesting, that after every pandemic that has occurred, we've seen an outbreak of measles. So what exactly is measles and why do we then see it after the outbreak of every pandemic?
Well, the big thing is measles is a viral illness, and we need to make a distinction between German measles, which is rubella, and then we have simple measles, which is called rubeola. And it's a virus, it belongs to a specific genus group, the morbillivirus. And the big issue, it's a highly contagious virus. So if we think that COVID was highly contagious, measles is probably 3 times more contagious than COVID. It's also being transferred and transmitted in exactly the same way, through coughing in a room, and where you initially had, for every 1 case of COVID that's in a room, you can have 6 or maybe 7 cases that you transmitted to. When it comes to measles, you can actually infect up to 17 people in a room.
Wow.
And the big thing, association between a pandemic and the explosion of measles, for instance, is because during a pandemic, people are avoiding clinics, they are avoiding hospitals, they're not going there, meaning their kids are not vaccinated, meaning they are not receiving their boosters. Hence the reason, post the pandemic, we see an explosion of vaccine-preventable diseases.
Yeah, so it's a cultural mindset or a societal mindset that's developed as a result of what we've seen in the news and what's been happening in the world with regards to vaccinations. And so we've spoken about the fact that it's 3 times as infectious, which is quite concerning. So, Dr. Howard, with what we know right now, is this something that we should be very concerned about as South Africans?
Well, with measles, it's always a concern. Like Dr. Reid said, it's the most contagious virus we know. And because our immunization rates have dropped substantially, especially after COVID, people, scared to go to the clinics, etc., there's always a risk of a major outbreak. And because it's so contagious, we are always concerned. The last major outbreak we had was in 2009, and I still remember those days vividly. It was as bad as COVID in the pediatric wards. Wow. It was really bad. So yes, we are worried. Measles is spread, like, as he mentioned, through the aerosol route. So somebody just talks or coughs, and if another susceptible person comes along in a poorly ventilated space, you breathe it in. So it's very easy to contract. You can also get it through somebody coughing on you, the droplet spread, or even contaminated surfaces. So similar to COVID.
As a parent, I'm concerned about, obviously children, they have very little understanding about personal space and those kind of things. What are some of the symptoms I should be looking out for, especially in my child? Because I'm assuming that children are most at risk, most vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And usually kids below the age of 5 are most at risk. And the important thing to look out for, Katleho, is fever. And usually that fever carries on for a few days, and you're actually struggling to break that fever with normal paracetamol. So it usually lasts about 3 days. And then you get the triple C's. You get coughing, which is a big issue. You get a conjunctivitis, which is an inflammation of the conjunctiva, the eyes.
Okay.
And you get coryza, which means a blocked nose. And then you get to a phase that is called the prodrome phase. And then we get the phase that we call the exanthem phase. And that is where you actually have a rash, starting in the hairline and the face and actually going down to the rest of the body. Fever plus rash in South Africa at this moment means measles.
Okay. So we definitely need to be on the lookout for that. I'm wondering what parents should do right now, Dr. Howard.
Well, the most important thing is vaccination.
Yeah.
If your child has missed their routine immunization, we're talking about babies here in particular, it's never too late to get the catch-up vaccination. That's the take-home message.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Always a pleasure to be chatting to you. Of course, we all want our children to be healthy, happy, and ready for the year ahead. If you have any questions, please do send them through to 063 408 8863.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back to your Feel Good Breakfast Show on this Tuesday morning as we continue our health chat with our doctors, HIV and infectious diseases expert Dr. Emil Reed and pathologist Dr. Howard Newman, and they're still with us this morning to continue the discussion around the measles outbreak that we heard about since October of last year. Now, the measles virus is one of the most infectious viruses known to humankind, and with all of the schools, of course, starting off with their official school year, having started all across the country, the NICD has warned people to be very vigilant. If you have any questions, please send them through via voice note to 063 408 8863. I believe we do have a voice note. Let's have a listen.
Good morning, Feel Good Expresso team. Mrs. Nirmala Devi Mudli of Amkumas, and good morning to your guests as well. Educate us on chickenpox and measles. Are they of the same family? Contagious? And of course, we do know now through the vaccinations given over the years, we don't see it as a pandemic or an outbreak like before. Thank you. Have a blessed day.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Moodley. Gentlemen.
Yeah, that's a good question. Measles and chickenpox are completely different viruses. They're in different families. They can both be spread through the aerosol route, so they're both very infectious, but they're completely different. They give you a completely different disease profile. And she is correct, with the routine immunizations in childhood, we don't see as much measles anymore as we used to. The vaccine has been around for decades already, so outbreaks are not that common. But it's still around and we still do get outbreaks, so vaccination is very important.
Yeah, continuing on that note of immunization and vaccination, why is it so important? I mean, obviously, I think it's been said widely enough and enough times for us to now realize how important it is, especially for children, to protect them against things like this. But if you were to just maybe, stamp that point a little bit further home.
Okay, so we've got an effective, safe vaccine available. It's given to children as part of the routine immunization program. In the public sector, it's given at 6 months and 12 months.
Yes.
And in the private sector, it's a bit later. It's a different type of vaccine. I think it's 12 months and 15 months. So we've got a safe, effective vaccine that's known to prevent severe disease in children. So it just does not make sense not to take your child for those routine immunizations.
Yeah, you can't overemphasize that. We'll touch on why measles in particular is so contagious, but let's quickly take another voice note and have a listen. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Expresso show and the doctors on the show. So my question is, with centres being back, creches being back, what are the things that as principals and teachers we need to put in place to not have a situation like that? Please, can you guide us on that? Because as you know, children are coming back into the environment and they come from homes and they've been on holiday. So please, just can you guide us on that?
Thank you very much for that. One of our principals there asking a very relevant question.
Absolutely amazing question. And I think the first thing I would actually say is ask every child for their road to health chart. And that is the chart that documents the kids' vaccination status. So when you go to a school and you apply to actually get access to a school or to a creche, ask for the road to health vaccination chart. So if you can actually see that this child has not been vaccinated, you can actually ask the parents, please make sure that the child gets the second dose, or please make sure that the child still needs both shots of MMR. And that is important, Kanslejo, and we cannot overemphasize that point. So the road to health chart, very, very important.
Very important indeed. And so to parents, I guess the message, as has been highlighted in this particular segment of our health chat, is get your child vaccinated. Make sure that they're up to date with their vaccinations. There is a standard protocol applied all across the country that ensures that our children are kept safe, because as you will hear a little bit later on, we'll talk about some of the complications that can arise from an infection of measles and how those could be very detrimental to your health in later times. Of course, we'd love to hear from you. 063 408 8863. We'll have another chat with the doctors very shortly.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back to a new day as we wrap up our discussion on measles with HIV and infectious diseases expert, Dr. Emil Reid, and pathologist, Dr. Howard Newman. Of course, this is your last chance to send through those voice notes, those questions that you might have on 063 408 8863. So, Dr. Reid, can contracting measles lead to other infections? I mean, we spoke about the complications that can arise from measles.
Yes, yes, and yes. People think measles, it's all about fever and a skin rash, and then after that, everything is fine. It's actually not like that. You know, you are infectious. You can infect other kids 4 days before the rash starts and 4 days after the rash have started. And you only get diagnosed once the rash is there. So you've already infected other children before you develop the rash. But the big thing when it comes to complications, you can have complications years after you had measles. And we see that measles actually knocks your immune system for a 6, talking about the cricket. And what then happens is your all-cause mortality, as we call it, increases a year after you had measles. And meaning that you can develop a year after you had measles, you can develop pneumonia, ear infections, you can develop severe gastroenteritis or diarrhea, or you can develop something we call encephalitis, meaning severe inflammation of the brain tissue. And there's a diagnosis we call subacute sclerotic panencephalitis, SSPE, that can develop 10 years after you had measles, meaning that those kids have mood disturbances, they can develop epilepsy and all sorts of other problems. So it's not just about measles, but also the long-term complications of it.
That's highlighting why this is so important to understand at this juncture. Before we head on to the next question, let's take a voice note. Let's have a listen. Good morning.
Morning Expresso show and the doctors. Quick question. My son is 18 years old and he's never had any measles or mumps. Should I be concerned? Thank you.
Great question. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Howard.
Okay, so it will depend on a few factors, whether he's been vaccinated as a baby. So we know that vaccination provides very long-term protection. If you were vaccinated as a child and you're an adult now, that immunity doesn't last forever. However, there will always be some form of immunological memory, so you should be protected either against infection or severe disease. The other thing we're worried about is comorbidities. If he's got a compromised immune system or any other condition that predisposes to severe infection, then of course one would consider boosting those patients as well, whether they've been vaccinated or not, in an outbreak situation. So for the normal, healthy adult who's been vaccinated as a child, there's no need to stress at this point.
No need to worry. Let's go back to children, more specifically thinking about pregnancy and the transferring of the virus from mother to fetus. Is that something of concern, and how could that affect the baby?
Yeah, so unfortunately, pregnancy, like with quite a few other viral infections, is always a high risk for severe disease. So pregnant with measles, unfortunately, is no different. If you're pregnant and you contract measles, there's a very good chance that you can have very severe disease. In fact, up to 10% of pregnant mothers can actually pass away, die. So it can be very severe. The fetus is not spared either. You can get spontaneous miscarriages. You can have stillbirths. The child can be underweight for age.
Sure.
So it can be severe for the child as well.
Yeah. So with that said, how is it diagnosed then, and what are we to do?
Okay, in terms of the diagnosis, there's different tests that we offer. At PathCare, we offer a serological test as well as a PCR test, which is a molecular test. The serological test is done on blood samples, and we essentially test for two types of antibodies. The one is called IgG, the one is called IgM. If the IgM is positive, it means the person has an acute measles virus infection. Sometimes, especially outside of an outbreak setting, you need to do a PCR as well to confirm that infection. So if you've got a positive IgM, a positive PCR, there's no doubt that the person has an acute measles virus infection.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of what we can do now, so I think for all parents, ensuring that your children are immunized. I have followed the protocol according to their, what do you call that, the
immunization schedule.
The immunization schedule.
Yeah.
And what else can we do?
Well, there's not a lot we can do. I think we need to stress vaccination as the most important thing. If you look at this vaccination, if you have a vaccination that has been available since 1963, that shows an efficacy of 97 to 98%, why not? You know, so it's not a new vaccine. It's an old, live, attenuated vaccine. Hence the reason for us not to vaccinate little babies, the 1 to 4 months, because it's a live vaccine and can cause harm in the immature baby's immune system. But the big thing is vaccinate, vaccinate, vaccinate.
Yeah. And that's the big message. Dr. Reed, Dr. Howard, thank you very much for joining us. Wishing you a bright and sunny, hopefully, in the Mother City Tuesday. And I hope that you were enlightened by that conversation. But please do continue to interact with us and let us know your thoughts. Of course, we are available all over social media as we continue your Tuesday morning.